morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Zoom training for church officers and leaders. The Cabinet offers this annual training because the leadership in our local churches changes regularly. Each year, new individuals step into roles on councils, committees, and ministry teams, and this training is intended to support you as you learn how to serve faithfully and effectively in accordance with the polity and practices of the United Methodist Church. Because much of this material remains consistent from year to year, we asked you in advance to review the previously recorded training videos. This morning, rather than repeating that content, we will focus on a few essential principles we must always keep in mind, along with several important updates for this year. Each presentation this morning will be approximately 20 minutes long, with the exception of the first, which will be about 10 minutes. As you listen, questions may naturally arise. Please hold your questions until our designated Q&A time later in the session. At that time, we invite you to use the Q&A function, and the district superintendent and Diane will respond to your questions. Now let us begin by opening this meeting with prayer. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we thank you for gathering us together this morning. We give thanks for all who serve as leaders in your church and for their willingness to offer their time, gifts, and faith in service to your people. As we learn together, grant us wisdom, clarity, and humility, that all we do may reflect your will and strengthen the ministry of your church. Guide our conversations, bless our time, and lead us in the way of Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Now I would like to invite Martin Lee, Director of Connectional Ministries, to speak of our conference staff and their functions, especially who to call for what. Martin Lee?
Thank you, dear Samuel. Let me share with you my slides. Can you see it?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Good morning, siblings. I'm at Wesley United Methodist Church in San Jose. We're having a Asian caucus gathering in this beautiful place. Let's begin with our shared vision. Our vision is following Jesus, thriving in community, healing the world. So it's all about communications, and communications. Our conference website is your first and best resource. Most information you need is already available there. Before contacting staff, please check the website first. This helps us support your ministry more effectively. My daughter often tells me that ask Google. In the same way, I encourage each of you, please check the conference website first. It is designed to serve and support you. So let's begin with the communications. We have amazing staff and isolating communications department. She works for conference website updates and changes and newsletters. So when you have compelling stories, please contact her. We like to share larger our community. and also conference, social media, and anything you need a communication request, please contact Hannah. And also you may have a lot of questions about LSM. We have amazing volunteer LSM coordinator, Wendy Harden. If you have any questions about information on LSM classes, check again our website first. And then if you have further questions, just email lsm@cnumc.org. So it comes to me, Sandy, Krisha, and few others. So we'll check email time to time, and we'll give you your questions in timely manner. So please email it to us. Again, lsm@cnumc.org. And also we have a volunteer UMBIM coordinator, Steve Elliott, just an amazing person. He goes everywhere needed. One thing I really like to highlight is that when your congregation planning to go to a mission trip, contact him, email him. He will guide you and help you mission trip insurance coverage. And also, we have a database coordinator, Amanda Garcia. And if you have a question about the conference email accounts, contact her. If you'd like to update your personal information, again, please contact Amanda. And also we have intergenerational ministries, Reverend Jesse Pickens Johns. Focus on the youth and young adult participation for annual conference session. If you have any questions, contact her and she will guide you. And camping and retreat, especially upcoming Bishop's confirmation retreat, just an amazing opportunity. They will learn in the setting that diverse, and also Bishop Sandy is leading for the confirmation. And especially I like to highlight this morning the resources on curriculum for children and family, youth, or intergenerational worship or discipleship. This is crucial that we really discipling young disciples, children, youth, and young adults. And also we have a support staff, and the Claudia Newman helps us out. And if you need anybody from your congregation wanting to help and lead a children's ministry or Sunday school classrooms and other matters, one has to have take safe gatherings training. And when you take it, it qualifies for 3 years. After 3 years, you are required to take again so that we can update your records as well. So friends, we are here as a conference staff exists to serve local congregations. Please reach out at any time through emails, and we'll check email time to time. And we are partners in ministry. Thank you so much. Your amazing leadership, every community, every local congregations. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Now I invite Diane Knudsen, our conference treasurer, to speak of finance and trustees matters.
Thank you, Samuel. Let me share my screen. My name is Diane Knudsen. I'm the conference treasurer, and I'm here to support. I support the conference finance council and trustees, but I also am here as a resource for your church's finance committee and treasurer and trustees. Let me share my screen. Can you see it? Okay. There we go. Again, here's my contact information. Feel free to call or email at any time. I'm here to support your finance committee and your treasurer, your board, your trustees. And so we'll start with information really around trustees. One of the more beautiful things I think about our denomination is this notion of how we hold all of our property, all of our stuff in trust for each other. So if you're new to United Methodism or Methodism in general, this may be a difficult concept to grasp sometimes, but this is something that sometimes we have to explain to our secular colleagues when we're trying to explain why we do the things we do. Our property is all held in trust for the United Methodist Church. So even though your church is a corporation, and that corporation does hold title to your individual church property, the fiduciary duty of your church trustees goes beyond the congregation itself. So as church officers, you are all fiduciaries not only to your congregation, but to the entire denomination. And that is, while it is a trust that is created within the Book of Discipline, it is also a trust that is legally recognized in every state. So it's a real trust, and it's not revocable as long as you are still being a United Methodist Church. So as I said, I want to go through some of the corporate sort of legal parts that I get a lot of questions about. One of the questions I get is sometimes churches want some kind of document to demonstrate or prove that they are a nonprofit organization, 501c3 organization. And the way in which your church is a 501c3 organization is through a group ruling with the IRS through the denomination. So so this confuses people because let's say you have a donor that wants evidence that that they're giving to a nonprofit, and they will go to the IRS website and they'll type in the name of your church, or maybe they'll even type in your church's employer identification number, and it won't show up on the IRS website as a nonprofit. So what we have to do is you just have to explain to folks that your church is part of a bigger 501c3 organization ruling. It's called a group ruling, which says all United Methodist churches and entities are part of the same ruling. And so in order to give people a document, you can go to this website. It's called umgroupruling.org. And you just need to know your church's employer identification number. This is a number that any entity that does payroll in the United States has to identify themselves to the IRS. You put that number in this website and some contact information, and you'll get a letter pop out immediately. You can download it or you can print it that says your church specifically is part of this group ruling. And that's what you give to people to document that you are a nonprofit organization. So for instance, might have to give that to a donor, or a donor might have to give that to their employer in order to get like a matching gift sent to your church. Or if somebody's trying to get a grant, sometimes you have to demonstrate that. Even opening a bank account, sometimes you need to show this to the bankers. The second level of governance, I would say, in the secular world is at the state level. This is the level at which your church is incorporated. So California churches in California are incorporated in the state of California through the Secretary of State there. And likewise, Nevada churches are corporations through the Nevada Secretary of State. And here are the website links to those places. This is really important. It's really important if you're new to the position, in a trustee position, or even, finance committee person. I would go to that website and type in your church's name in the business search just to make sure that your church's corporation is in good standing. And really the only requirement to keep your corporation in good standing is to keep your officers up to date at those two websites. So for the California churches, you need to go to this website and enter in your church officers every 2 years, even if they don't change. Excuse me. On the Nevada website, I don't think your church officers will necessarily expire, but they want you to go in and change them whenever they change. So there's no time limit, but you do need to get in there and change those officers. And the people that you should be listing as your officers, as the president of your church trustees, should be listed as the president of the corporation. And the secretary of your trustees should be listed as the secretary of the corporation. And your treasurer should be listed as the CFO. Finally, the next level at which you might have to deal with the government is with your county in terms of your property taxes. So all of your churches are designated as parcels at your county level. And in all likelihood, you're getting a property tax bill from your county every year, even if it's just a small little bit of money that's not excluded from your welfare exclusion. But at some point, hopefully in the past, somebody in your church applied for a property tax exemption through the county for your church parcels. And that exemption has to be renewed every year. The county will send your church sort of a checklist. It's the same in every county. And you're just documenting that you're still using the property for its exempt purposes. So be sure to do that, and please fill that out honestly, so that if by chance you are renting part of your space to a for-profit or to somebody else, you document that on that checklist and you provide the county what they need. What this means is it doesn't prohibit you from renting some of your property to a for-profit organization, but just know that the county assessor, if they're on the ball, will start assessing you some property taxes for that portion of your property. So I covered most of that. In California, I just want to explain that occasionally I'll hear about a church whose property tax exemption is not a welfare exemption, but it's called a religious exemption. And that is more restrictive. And it's possible, if your church is exempt from property taxes under a religious exemption, that an assessor will come out and start looking at the property and saying, well, this building isn't being used for worship, and so it's not property tax exempt. Or this building is being used for a preschool or something else. And they're not going to give you a property tax exemption under the religious exemption. So I would encourage you all, if that happens, don't panic. Just get in the paperwork to make your property tax exemption a welfare exemption. And I can help you do that. And I think I already covered the outside groups piece. You can, as a church trustees board, can rent part of your property out to outside groups. You just want to, if you have a lease, if you're really entering into a lease, you need to share that lease with your DS, and you need to be prepared to be assessed some property taxes if you're leasing out to a for-profit group. Oftentimes people call me up when they're trying to decide whether to, let's say, rent an office to, let's say, an insurance agent or somebody that's for-profit. They're afraid that they're going to lose their tax exempt status with the IRS. Well, that's not going to happen. That's really not a problem for the IRS. It's just a problem for the county because you're using part of your property for a for-profit. Really, the only way to lose your not-for-profit status with the IRS is to get involved with supporting a political candidate, sort of in an official way. That can get you in trouble with the IRS. And then the only other scenario would be if you're just not really a church anymore. If you're operating a Burger King out of your building and you're not really a church anymore, then you could lose your property tax exception. Okay, I think I've covered the trustees material. I'd like to cover a little bit of the excuse me, finance matters now. These are sort of the things that come up a lot for me. Excuse me, I'm gonna get a drink. There's a lot I could say about church treasurers and church finance. In fact, I could probably do a whole workshop on, excuse me, again, just resourcing a church treasurer. But in the time we have today, I just want to sort of highlight some of the things that come up a lot, some of the things that pose the most risk, I guess I would say, in terms of how we do our finances at our local churches. One of the biggest issues that can get us into trouble quickly is if we're treating everybody that we pay like they're an independent contractor when they're really not. The burden of proof is on the church to demonstrate why they don't have all these people on the payroll. So, for example, you have a custodian and you're giving that custodian a 1099 every year for the amount of money that you're paying the custodian. And that might be okay if that custodian is running a small business, a custodial service business, and they have other clients. They're advertising a custodial business. They're providing their own equipment and setting their own schedule. And so if that's all true, you need to document that as the reason why it's okay for you to be giving them a 1099, not putting them on the payroll, not withholding taxes, not paying into FICA for the employer share of those taxes. But again, the burden of proof is on you. So this often falls into the treasurer's lap to raise the red flag, but it's really an SPRC issue to make sure that all the people who are on the church staff are being treated on the payroll. Likewise, you might have the same sort of situation with the people taking care of the yard of the church. The gray area here sometimes are the musicians. So we can kind of go back and forth on the musicians, but just know that if it's a musician that's providing musical services for the church every single week and is part of the worship service regularly, probably should put them on payroll. All right. Another issue that pops up, usually in a bad way, is when somebody sort of disappears, somebody who has a responsibility for some sort of financial role in your church either leaves the church or dies or is incapacitated in some way, and they have all the financial records at their house and their garage. It makes it very difficult to maintain a functionality within your church if your financial records are not on site. So please, if you're on the finance committee, make sure your treasurer and your financial secretary are keeping all the hard copy of records on site. It's okay for things to live in the cloud as long as other people have, some people, appropriate people have the access, the login for those records. But we really don't want any financial records or any really records of the church at all, probably at anybody's house. The big issue that comes up, especially at small churches, is this need for a segregation of duties in the financial area. So every church needs to have a treasurer. Every church needs to have a separate person who's a financial secretary. And every church needs to have a finance committee that has a chairperson. So that is the way in the United Methodist Church we require your church to have governance, to implement the governance of your financial life. The treasurer, the financial secretary, and the chair of finance need to be unrelated to each other, and they need to be unrelated to the pastor. So that's a big ask sometimes to find people to do those roles, but it's really important that you do. The treasurer's role is really to keep the book, be the bookkeeper, probably, produce the financial reports, write the checks, and make sure the finance committee gets accurate, timely financial reports at their meetings. Financial secretary's role is on the income side of the house. Financial secretary is recruiting the people to count the offering every Sunday and to make that deposit, document that deposit for the treasurer, just in terms of the amount of money deposited and what accounts it should go into or what kind of income it was. And they're also keeping all of the records on the donors, and providing the donors the financial reports for their donation. Another thing that pops up a lot around the financial secretary is, of course, the financial secretary has to keep those records confidential in terms of the donations, but not confidential to the pastor. So the pastor should be able to review donations if they choose to. Then you have a chair of the finance committee. So it is important to have a finance committee that meets regularly, receives financial reports, is basically providing oversight to both the treasurer and the financial secretary, making sure that their work is being done and being done properly. And don't forget that every year that finance committee needs to recruit somebody else to do the audit for your church. So that's a lot. It just has to be that way. In order for our churches to be as financially responsible as any other organization in your town, we need volunteers to do those things. And sometimes we hire a payroll service or we hire a bookkeeping service, which is great, but your treasurer still needs to be overseeing that work. I want that church treasurer to provide the finance committee at every meeting a financial statement that has a balance sheet that shows every bank account and every investment account that is reconciled every month. And I want that to be part of the financial statements that your finance committee is reviewing every month. And I want your finance committee to put together a budget every year so that the finance committee can monitor those expenses, make sure nothing's getting out of control. Finance committee are going to be looking at a financial statement that will likely have a few different pots. You have an operating fund, you might have a building fund, but hopefully you don't have 100 different funds from little things that people have given to over the years. If you do have lots of little funds from things that people have given to over the years, then it's the finance committee's task to try to consolidate those or give the money back or just figure out how to use that money. Finally, I want you to make sure as a finance committee that the people that are on the bank accounts are the people that are still in the proper roles, and that your pastor is not on any of those bank accounts or your investment accounts. It's very important that the pastor is not part of the financial function at all. They shouldn't be a check signer. They shouldn't have permissions on the bank accounts. All right. Well, this is the web page that you can go to get more information. This is where I put lots of resources for your churches. In fact, I'm going to see if we can link to it really quickly before I leave. See if it'll go. Maybe not. Well, let me end this and I'll just go there manually then. Hang on. Go to the website. Go to departments, go to finance and administration, and then there's a place where you can say for churches. And this is where I put resources for you. Reports about tithe giving of all the churches, spending reports, and then if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see some other resources. So anyway, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Diane. And now it's time for Mary for SBIC Matters.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. It is my opinion that a fully functioning, healthy, robust staff parish relations committee is at the very heart of what makes a church healthy. And so I'm going to share just some resources, but also some things that I think you need to bear in mind, those of you who are part of Staff Parish Relations Committee, or even if you're other leaders in other areas of the church's life. These are things that the Staff Parish Relations Committee will be focused on, hopefully in the year ahead. First of all, you need some tools. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on these tools, but if you're interested in a ton of really helpful details, I want to recommend the 2024 video to you that Reverend D.S. Sunny Kim made in 2024. It's great. And it goes through all the details of how to have membership in your SPRC, how to go about making sure that you have representation on your SPRC, etc. But for those of you who are here today who have not seen that 2024 video, I want to commend to you these 2 paragraphs that you will find in the Book of Discipline. And in fact, I recommend to your Staff Parish Relations Committee that you actually spend a whole meeting walking through the details that are included in paragraph 258.2, which is a description of the role and the responsibilities of the Staff Parish Relations Committee. I think it's really good for everyone that's on your committee to have a disciplinary understanding of what your function is. The second thing is that in paragraph 340, you will read a long list of the responsibilities and duties of elders and licensed local pastors. When you read that, I think that by the end of reading it, you'll say, how could anybody possibly do everything that's being asked of them? It covers word, sacrament, order, witness. And then you would hopefully answer that question of how could anybody ever by saying the pastor or the licensed local pastor, the elder, can't do it alone. That this is a description of responsibilities and duties that can only be accomplished in partnership with a really vigorous group of lay people in the local church. Guess what? Staff Parish Relations Committee, you are the core of that vigorous group of laity. And so it's really important that you have a chance to read through that as well, and maybe even use the newsletter that you produce or your website, or even a little moment on Sunday morning if your worship leader and pastor think this is a good idea, to just highlight some part of the responsibilities and duties of elders and licensed local pastors, because we are in this together. And finally, there is a guidelines booklet that you can get from Cokesbury, very inexpensive, that looks not just at the roles and responsibilities of the Staff Parish Relations Committee. It also gives a suggestion for the kinds of things that need to be emphasized every month of the year. So, for example, a parsonage walkthrough, looking at compensation, making sure that your pastor is taking their day off or their vacation, just evaluation of contracts with your other employees, etc. So that's really very helpful too. So those are the tools that are needed for a fully functioning Staff Parish Relations Committee. Now I want to talk a little bit about impactful Staff Parish Relations Committees. You are not a warehouse for complaints. Rather, you are mature spiritual leaders who are discerning problem solvers. Did you know that's what you were signing up for? Some of you are like, nobody told me that. But the truth is, in well-functioning churches, that is who you are. And hopefully you got nominated by your nominating committee because they saw in you somebody who was a mature Christian leader who could go about doing problem solving. But here's the most important things to keep in mind if you're going to be an impactful SPRC. First of all, you must keep confidentiality. Yes, that even includes your family members. You don't share what happens in the staff parish relations committee with your spouse, with your children, with your parent, with your curious friend. If a curious friend says, "Ooh, what happened at SPRC?" Your answer has to be, "You know, I can't share that with you. All of our work is confidential." Now, there are exceptions, of course. If the group as a whole, including your pastor, and remember, you're never going to meet together unless the pastor is with you or has approved of you meeting without him, her, or them, or if the district superintendent is meeting with you. So you're never meeting apart from your pastor being present or knowing that you're meeting apart from them. Is that maybe you as a group decide, we really want to share with the congregation, highlight something, the way we're approaching a problem, or a way that we want to celebrate something about our mission or ministry. Then you can, of course, share that with anyone you want. But always assume confidentiality unless it's really explicitly spelled out that you are, as a group, going to share something with your congregation or community. Now, here's, to my mind, the most important thing. For a fully functioning and well-oiled machine of an impactful SPRC, you need to be the kind of spiritual leaders that see God at work, even in conflict. And for me, that means that prayer is essential. I know that some of you likely feel a little cynical about the appointment process and maybe feel like you have no idea how your church got that particular pastor. I've heard it said in less formal moments that some of you think that we actually have a dartboard in the cabinet room where we actually throw darts to figure out who's going to go where. Well, friends, since I've been in the midst of this process now, this is my second year of being engaged in this appointment process, I'm here to tell you that your district superintendents who are here in this room, Mike and Marcia and Samuel, as well as the ones who are not in this room right now, take the appointment process absolutely to heart. The bishop leads us in a discernment process where we look carefully at the needs of the church, at the needs of the community, and at the gifts and graces of the clergy people. And so I want you to trust that the pastor you are receiving is somebody you're receiving because the grace of God and the power of the Holy Spirit has led in that appointment process. And because of that, I would like you to see God at work, even if there's some conflict between the clergy person and the congregation, or the certain church leaders and the clergy person, to know that God is at work in that, leading us all onto, as Wesley would say, onto perfection, onto greater love of God, neighbor, and self. Okay, the next point is I would like all of our SPRCs in the conference to refrain from discussing anonymous complaints. I am not a fan of the anonymous survey that goes out to your congregation. I am not a fan of the suggestion box that recommends that people make anonymous comments. The reason being that if we really do believe that we're in this together, that we are mature Christian leaders who, through the power of God's grace, can make an impact on our communities, if we really do believe that, then we have to own the things that we are in disagreement about and be willing to discuss those things together in partnership. Because complaints really can be legitimate, of course, but they have to be part of a bigger conversation. So somebody says, I don't like that. And then the church leader or the pastor can say, well, I could adjust that, but here's why I'm doing it that way. Oh, I didn't know. Could I maybe help us shift a different direction? Sure, let's pray about it and see if we can shift it a different direction. So it's a different kind of mindset than you're receiving a pastor as a product, and then you get to sort of evaluate that product. No, this is all about relationship with God with community, with one another. And so I think that if a complaint comes in anonymously, it just needs to be trash canned until somebody's willing to own what it is that they're concerned about. Now, when I shared this point on Thursday evening, District Superintendent Sunny Kim, who was on that, she made the point that in some contexts, there can feel like there's some intimidation by the pastor, like that the pastor's got all this power. People may feel that they want to do a critique or a complaint or a suggestion, but they're afraid to go talk to the pastor directly. Guess what? That's what your staff parish relations committee is for. So you can come talk to one of them, and maybe they can even accompany you to the pastor or even be your conduit to the pastor, but not anonymously, right? You have to own what it is that you're concerned about. I also recommend that SPRCs meet regularly. Remember, you're creating your own little subgroup, your own little class, if you will, of connection. And so by meeting regularly, you'll be more equipped that if there is a problem that needs to be addressed, you will know and trust one another. And then it's easier then to be discerning problem solvers. And that way also, if you've got an hour to meet, you could discuss goals and successes, not just problems that you see. And finally, build relationships. Build that relationship with your clergy, but also with the rest of your staff and the rest of church leadership as well. So let me say another word about confidentiality. Meetings, SPRC meetings, are the place for discussion, not coffee hour, not side conversations between one or two SPRC members, not between you and the lay leader and another SPRC meeting. If something rises to the level where you feel like, I don't think we really talked about that enough, contact your SPRC chair, contact your pastor, and call for another meeting. There's no reason not to meet, because if something's bothering you that leads you to want to talk about it as a side conversation, it's likely bothering other people as well and ought to be talked about as a whole group. Strict confidence is required. If you feel you cannot uphold confidentiality, if somebody says, I heard there's this problem, I'm interested in what you talked about at SPRC, and if you feel like, oh man, I always like to be the one with information, I will spill the beans if I'm asked a couple of different times, please don't serve on SPRC. There are other wonderful ways that you can give your gifts to the work of the church. There's other committees, there's other work areas, could be a Sunday school teacher, but this is the one where you really have to be able to say no to people who are applying you for information. And finally, the district superintendent communicates through the SPRC. So we're right now in the midst of appointment season here in the Cal Nevada Conference, and I am reaching out to staff parish relations chairs to look at compensation packages, to talk to them about arranging a meeting so that they can meet the person who's being appointed to their church. It's very important that as a district superintendent, we be able to talk with SPRCs and have trust that when we say, you can know this now, but we cannot share this with the congregation for another week or two, that we can trust that you really are going to keep that confidentiality. Okay, so now I'm going to go into a section about what your pastor needs you to do and what your district superintendent needs you to do, etc. So your pastor needs you to make time to truly get to know them. I was surprised when I read this study just a couple of years ago that said that the majority of pastors in the United Methodist Church, it was United Methodist Church specific, the majority of pastors are introverts, not extroverts. Now that may surprise some of you lay people who are in this training today, because you're like, but wait a second, they stand up at a microphone and they lead meetings, and that sounds like extroverted activity. Well, many of us have learned how to do that, but it's not our best thing. So we tend to be more introspective, more kind of spiritually guided than conversationally guided. And what that really means is that you may see how we act as pastors, even how we perform, if you will, as pastors, but that doesn't mean that you know us. And so, Staff Parish Relations Committee, it is very, very important that you get to know your pastor. And that means spending time to get to know them, not sort of judging them based on Sunday morning or based on committee leadership, but like spending time to know them and for them to know you. Create opportunities for people to know each other at more than the surface level. The other thing that the pastor needs you to do is offer honest, balanced, thoughtful, prayerful feedback. So what that means is when there's a problem, see that problem not as, yikes, the whole thing's going to blow up. Oh no, what are we going to do? But instead, see the problem in that bigger context of the things that are going right and that are being done well in your church family. But you know what? It also doesn't make sense to pretend like there's not a problem if there is a problem. You got to be honest too. Remember the previous couple of slides back where I was saying that we're trusting God in all of this? If you're not honest, that means you're not trusting the process of community building that we're about in the United Methodist Church. Please, friends, advocate for your clergy person's well-being and their family's well-being. It is essential that a pastor have a day off where they can really unplug, and where you as an SPRC make it clear to the congregation, please, unless it really is like a really true emergency, honor their day off. Just don't be in touch with them on their day off so they can really unplug. Make sure your clergy person gets their vacations. Make sure they do their spiritual renewal leave. Make sure that they get their continuing education time. These matter, because hopefully what you want is a clergy person who has to be dragged kicking and screaming from your church, right? You love them so much, you want them to be there forever. And so part of how you get that longevity and you avoid burnout is by making sure that you care for their well-being. And finally, be visible to the congregation, Staff Parish Relations Committee. Make sure that your church knows who you are. Make sure that you are helping them to understand the role and responsibilities of the pastor. Help your congregation to understand that teamwork is at the heart of this. Educate your congregation. Read those paragraphs about Staff Parish Relations Committee that's in the Book of Discipline about the roles and responsibilities of the pastor. Celebrate things that you find to be cool or quirky about the pastor or their family. Of course, clear that with them first, right? Before you blab it during worship. But really celebrate who God has sent to you and help them to celebrate where they've been sent to. And in times of crisis, adopt a we are all in this together mentality, please. Okay, so what I need from you, or what any of the district superintendents here need in any of the 5 districts of our conference, is for you to be spiritual leaders, for you to engage in worship, Bible study, prayer. I find that people who are spiritual leaders tend to not get caught up in divisive, argumentative dissensions. But if you're a spiritual leader, I think you're always trying to find a way to create community and trust and a learning moment, right? And so the more you as members are engaged in worship, Bible study, prayer, the better off it is for the whole church. Please conduct a yearly parsonage walkthrough. even if your parsonage is being rented to an outside person. It's very important. And the reason it's important is so that there is not a lot of deferred maintenance that has to be dealt with all at once when you get a pastoral change, or if you're renting it out to somebody outside of the church, or when the DS calls you up and says, hey, we're going to need to use that parsonage. You don't want to be like, yikes, we got to replace the roof. We've got appliances that are on the blink. Oh gosh, the carpets are terrible. If you do a yearly walkthrough, you'll be able to integrate maintenance of this amazing asset that you have, the parsonage that you own. You'll be able to keep it up. And while, I mean, I always found it embarrassing to have the SPRC chair and the trustees chair walk through my house and have it pointed out to me, boy, your dog chewed that baseboard. Yep. And if you'll replace it, I'll pay for all of it, right? To be fixed. Like, it's embarrassing, right? But it's also part of how we are good stewards of this wonderful asset of the parsonage. So SPRC, you're responsible for that. And I usually book it like in March or April, do the walkthrough. That way, if you do get a call from your DS that there's going to be a pastoral change, you're ready to do the things that have to be done. Also, clergy, those of you who are watching this, don't wait till the end of your tenure to say, hey, our appliances haven't been working for 4 years. Like, when those things happen, please let your SPRC know. And then, as Diane mentioned, follow best practices in hiring non-clergy staff and compensating them on the payroll. When in doubt, what are you going to do? Go to our website. It's full of wonderful information about how to hire lay employees and how to have an agreement with them, how to pay them, etc. And then last but not least, I'm bumping into this right now during appointment season. SPRC, understand what your church can afford, especially regarding pastoral compensation. When I call an SPRC and say, I'm going to send you a draft compensation package, and the SPRC goes, yikes, I have no idea if we can do this or not. That's not good, right? No, what portion of the overall church budget is going to the clergy? Make sure that you have enough awareness of the financial part. This is about staying connected with the rest of the church leaders as well, SPRC, so that you can say to me, yeah, we can do that. All right. And above all, and then this is me, be a team with God above all, be a team with your pastor, be a team with your congregation, be a team with your district. We're here to serve you. Reach out to your DSs or to our administrative assistants or to your district lay leader. We're here to be a team with you. Be a team with your conference. Because, friends, there's no such thing as us as a local church and the conference, right? We are the conference. And so if you want to see improvements made on the part of the conference, let's do that, because we really are a team. Thank you for your time and attention.
Samuel, you're muted.
So it's time to present the church administration in a single board model done by Sunhee. Sunhee Kim gave her presentation Thursday night from Korea. But since she's still in Korea and it is very, very early morning there, I will be using her portion recorded Thursday night. Okay.
Hopefully that I can follow this strong suit and finish less than 20 minutes. We'll see. My name is Sunny Kim, Bay District Superintendent. It's my pleasure to be with you this evening. I my part is administration and talk a little bit about single board model. And we heard wonderful presentation by Diane and Mary. So I don't have to repeat that. But if you have more resources you need, this is where I come and direct you to where to find them. This is our wonderful cnumc.org website homepage. If you go to district and you click on the district, then you'll see wonderful faces here with the great pictures. And then if you click Bay, that I embedded this helpful documents. There's 4 documents that it has compiled. We have compiled different resources into a document by finance, staff, parish, and trustees. And one more document called checklist. And I'll get to that real soon. But I just want to show you, for example, trustees, if you click on that, what you will see is first part 1, is the summary of a book of discipline, so that we'll know that composition of board of trustees, who can be a member, expectations of meetings and responsibilities, those kind of things will be summarized there. And then the second part is the church property management and more of the neat and gritty and nuts and bolts of the trustee work. And as Diane mentioned, I started out with a trust clause, so that with the understanding of what it means to be a Methodist and Wesleyan spirit, that we're all in this together in the mission of Jesus Christ. So because of this trust clause, and because church as a nonprofit, there are things that we need to tend to as a part of our administrative work. So that first part is trust clause, and second is church as nonprofit. And as Diane mentioned about tax exempt and legal compliances, I don't want to repeat that, but I just want to show you what this document can do. If you click on, she mentioned about tax exemption ruling under 501c3. If you click on this, that you will see that it takes you to our denominations, finance, and administration part. So the document has the link already, so that it made it easier for you to click on it and find what you need. Same thing as if you are looking at your church EIN number, you can click on this link to obtain the letter. So it's all in IRS. It takes you to IRS. So the idea is we want to put together all of these resources in one place for you to share with your leaders. I understand that one of the difficulty is your officers and the committee members are changing all the time. So I wanted to utilize this document as a way of sharing and training for new officers, and also check in with whether or not that your church is keep up with this important administrative work. And again, the welfare exemptions need to be filed by February 15, and click here for more details on how to. It leads to the link, and so forth. Also file a statement of information every 2 years for nonprofits. And for California, click here. And for Nevada, click here. Again, there's a link that takes you there. So having this electronic file is important. I just want you to be aware, who to put in terms of corporate CEO and secretary, CFO, and things like that. How to do the lease to the church property to the third parties, the details there. And also, if you have any questions, it's always good to check in with your district superintendent. And there's a 5 is to deals with insurance companies and their recommendation about how to ask for insurance coverage if you lease any part of your space, even a day or a month or for longer. Watch out for ADA regulations as well as you think about it. When you think about your churches engaging in new building, renovations and property developments, things like that. Here's the process. Because of trust clause, we ask you to follow this approval process. And one of the very important things is talk with your district superintendent who can guide you on the process. I want you to pay attention to these new laws, especially for California churches, that there's a new law in place for churches with 5+ employees and need to have a sexual harassment prevention training. If you have a preschool that's owned by the church, you are easily fall into this category. As well as a workplace violence prevention plan is applied to all the churches because it's 1 employee or more. So here's are the resources about what is overview, what is implemented outline, sample policies. It's all on our website actually. Let me click on here. So it takes you to that, an overview and even sample policy. If you click on that, you can download it, overview, and a PDF file. So please utilize these resources. Okay, so let me take you to real quickly about staff parish. That you have all these things that first part is about SPRC membership guidelines, again from the Book of Discipline. But I also want you to know that understanding how to work on the pastoral compensation package, because that's something that SPRC has a lot of question on, and the timing of it, and moving expensive questions, 80, the church pays first, and then get it reimbursed from the conference, 80% of that, and church is responsible for 20% of that. And you need to put that whole amount in as a part of pastor's W-2 on that year. Things like that. So all of that information is here. Encouraging pastors' time away and constructive feedback, all of that. I also put that year-end evaluations by the SPRC via People Portal is by December 15, around mid-December. So if you click on here, it takes you to the People Portal of the California Nevada Conference. SPRC chair can create that and talk with your pastor if you have any further questions. And itinerancy versus appointment, what that looks like, it's in there. Finance has a similar structure. It has the first Book of Discipline, but also it has the healthy financial policies and procedures. A lot of it is very, very helpful. I really think that it's important how to do the clergy W-2, and we highly recommend using the payroll services. And if you are looking for one, I found out there's from the West Path, that as a United Methodist Church, you can, if you're using the paychecks, you get 35% discount on it with this code. And so you can do that, you can utilize that. And and other finance, like I want to talk a little bit about audit, because a lot of people are asking about where to find the auditors and things like that. In fact, there is a guidelines from the GCFNA that according to size of the churches, you don't need to hire CPA, for example, that you can do, if you're smaller churches, you can exchange treasurers with other churches to do this audit, perform this audit, utilizing the form that's available in our conference. So you look at this, and the auditor will work with this file to see, to be able to conduct the audit. If you think that you haven't done an audit for a long time, you feel like our church really needs a little more comprehensive audit, it does not have to be by CPA, but someone who with similar caliber and know more, then contact district superintendent or Diane. And currently, we used to have a list of people, at least 3, but currently we don't have. But each DS might know somebody and might be able to connect with the other church's treasurer. So that would be an important piece of it. Once you're done, please share that report with Diane. Lastly is a checklist that I want to share with you. All of this I want to combine by month to month. the January as a leader, as a pastor and secretary, it'd be a wonderful resource. When the tithing is due, all this purple one is a legal matters that you need to attend to. So I wanted to take a look at this, and also Diane mentioned about tithing form, that this is how, then you click on it and you get the tithing form. So it's the same idea, it's somewhat repeated, but I want to put together in a month to month what is due and what we need to pay attention to, so we don't miss any of it. I just want to share with you, this is something that I learned from an attorney who helped me to, went through these documents. Is I want to share two things really important. One is to be able to pay attention to who is the employees, who is not. Diane also mentioned about that, and that is very important. So that's something that I need to pay attention to. The second one is actually whether the parsonage is rented out or pastors living there. It's a very important task for church to do the annual walkthrough, to make sure that the property is up to standard in a habitable condition. Otherwise, the church will be open to the legal risk for that. So hopefully that you'll pay attention to that. All of this available where? The cnumc.org/Bay District. So it's embedded in the first page. My second part that I want to do is a single board model overview. Our discipline actually allows for us to have a structure differently than what we used to. We used to have in the administrative part, have finance, SPRC, nominations, and trustees. That's a basic administrative board that we need to vote and elect at every church conference. But actually, we can structure it differently. Recently, with the size changes, that church is more interested in what is a single board model. Basically with a single board model, that we combined all these administrative board into one place. So you can your church council, perhaps, I'm using it as an example for now, can replace the finance, trustees, SPRC all together, and then nominations separately. That's a basic model. And there's a benefit of it because it creates a single decision-making body, governance body. So sometimes you have like trustees and finance and have all this homework and make a decision and send the recommendations to church council and meet again and then make a final vote. And you can actually skip that, so that reduce the meeting times, and therefore can address perhaps the fatigue and too much energy going into administrative work. And so that the hope is that we open up possibilities for more conversation about vision and mission, and more energy and focusing on missional work. So, again, reduce the complexity, fatigue, and develop stronger leadership. The smaller churches sometimes few people in different committees and overlap in many different responsibilities. So once people have a little bit of anxiety every time they're going through the changes, but once they made that changes, I haven't yet to see the church regret doing it. So I think that is working for a lot of churches who have gone through the transition. Typical structure of a single board, it has to be elected at the church conference, just like any other finance and any other administrative board, and all board members sharing that responsibility. Different sample structures. Typical one is you now have a single board and plus separate nomination committee. And it's recommended all of them a 3-year term. And the nomination committee is separate is because we don't want to have just a single board and everybody just repeat it without end. We want to have at least a new person, have an opportunity to have a new person to come in and the existing members to take some break. So the 3-year term and nominating committee working separately, who will be on the board. And then the alternative one is single board and nominating committee, but then there's a ministry team separately. Most like alternative one. This type of is a really small church. Most of churches might fall into alternative one. Is that there's a ministry teams, but chairs not all the chairs are part of the single board, but the single board members may be liaison to the team leaders so that the connection is there and bridge is there. But there's a ministry team is working along with the pastors into to work on that, but it's not necessary all the chairs has to be on the single board, but we encourage a liaison so you keep the connection going and communication going. Alternative two is there's times that the churches who has more staffing needs and confidentiality needs and more robust SPRC, but then you might want to have separate SPRCs from single board. So the SPRC is effectively deal with all the responsibility they need to do, plus deal with the confidentiality issue. So who is the typical membership composition? Typically 7 to 15 members. I actually do not recommend 15 members. It's just that, it's the practices, but probably 7 to 9 is more practical. And it includes board chair, of course. And this board chair is replacing in the trustee chair, by the way, because it's all combined, all one. And lay leader and lay member to annual conference are part of it, the membership. We encourage to have a youth or young adult provide insights from emerging generations perspective. If a charter group exists, UMN, UWF chairs, women of faith, and may include treasurer and or finance secretary if appropriate. For example, treasurer is paid one, they can attend, but they're not able to vote. And financial secretaries as well. And the positions on the board can be combined. So for example, the UMN chair as representing that part, but as well as, combining with, let's say, being a lay leader as well, or a lay member to ACS. So there's no problem or combining when appropriate. And may designate members to serve as a liaison, as I said, so that, as you're going into single board, it's really, once you get used to it, the communication is a lot easier. But in the beginning, you need to be really more intentional about communicating. Core work is, obviously, you do the administrative work, stewardship, setting the budget, and things like that. And provide, if you get the SPRC there, provide accountability and support for all ministry leaders. But strategic work, we really wanted to focus more on the conversation around mission and vision of the church, especially prioritizing resources to fulfill your church's vision effectively. And this is the body that is always seeing that ensure alignment of the church's mission and the strategic goals that you agreed upon. Generative work, you are asked to be in prayerful discernment to guide church's mission and initiative. For this reason, we really don't want the meeting to be like church council, typical church council, where a lot of churches give a lot of different ministry areas give reports. That will take up a lot of time. And we encourage you to find the creative ways to have that communication all the time through bulletins, newsletters, emails. So do, social medias, do something like that. But spend less time on the reporting during the meeting and more intentional about setting aside a conversation about finance and setting aside conversation about mission and vision and alignments and planning, those kind of, and the important decisions like vote that you have to do. So it takes a little bit of adjustment, but again, most churches who have gone through it, I really appreciate now to having a more streamlined meetings and decision making. Lastly, how to transition into it. I think the very first step is talk to your district superintendent that you're thinking about this, and ask your DS, and is there any resources that I can, I will share this PowerPoint with you, but any other, there's a lot of books and things, but what I started to find out really helpful is a network with churches that have successfully transitioned to gain the valuable lessons and insight and the best practices for effective implementation. Again, when you talk to the DS might know, because when DS might know that which church has gone through it, and I have seen different structures. People become very creative about it. So maybe DS can introduce one another, and I've seen it. The pastors like to invite another pastor to come and talk to their members and answer any questions in depth. So that'll be great. Step 2 is communicate. You want to have your engaged key leaders and congregation early on to create trust. And just like Mary said, we're all in this together. That's very important. Lastly is that this needs to be approved at the charge conference. So DS presiding, so that when you're ready to do it and make a presentation and to vote, you need to contact district superintendent to set a charge conference vote and have a minute. So it has to be in the district office in a file, so we all know that this happened. So we'll hope to have impactful benefits out of this. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This concludes our presentations. Now I would like to open the time for questions and answers. Please put your questions into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. DS Michael Harrell will read the questions, and the district superintendents and Diane will respond.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your Saturday morning to join us and be part of this annual gathering. As Samuel said, I'll be trying to facilitate the question and answer time. There's already been quite a few questions about where to find the resources. And so just to reiterate, after we're done, we will be collecting all of the resources, including the recording of this meeting. And we'll be parking them on the conference website in a dedicated place where it's all together. And then we will be emailing out a link to all of you who have participated to that page so you can find it and access it, review the material as you have a desire or a need going forward. So that's the plan there. I also noticed that DS Samuel did drop a few of the links in the chat function. So not the Q&A function, but the Zoom chat function. So if you haven't noticed that, there are some links there that you can review in the meantime. Okay. So first question I'll ask is, if the SPRC is part of the single board model, then does the confidentiality apply to the whole board?
Yes.
And as you know, the maximum number of SPRC is 9, plus lay leader, plus delegate to the annual conference. So say if you have a number 13, then you have to deal with that portion. But usually, my recommendation is to have a separate SPRC gathering, like composed of 3 or 4. In terms of things that will relate to finances, personal compensation, yeah, that could be shared within the single board. But if it is the confidential matters, then those 3 or 4 should meet separately.
Okay. So the next question also relates to SPRC and particularly around anonymous complaints and in situations where those anonymous complaints maybe allege abuse or illegal activities.
Oh.
So that intersection between anonymity and confidentiality and those types of concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if a person is alleging some kind of abuse or criminality, that person needs to go immediately to the SPRC, and the SPRC needs to go the chair, knowing who the person is. It cannot, the person, if there's suspicion of criminality or abuse, that is of the highest importance. And so I would say, when in doubt, contact your district superintendent. And then the district superintendent can take into consideration the context in which this is happening and also the information that you have, and can carefully guide you through that whole process. So yes, if you even suspect that there's abuse or criminality, go to your DS immediately.
Okay. Then this is a clarification about previous comment about Westpath and paychecks and a 35% discount. Wasn't clear what that discount was for. Was that something that you talked about, Diane?
No, that was in Sunhee's presentation.
Okay.
It's a discount that GCFA has negotiated on a national level for any United Methodist entity that's getting their payroll done by Paychex. So it should be a discount from your monthly fee from Paychex.
Okay, thank you. And then how does the value of itineracy weigh during the appointment making season?
Do you have any guess what they mean by the value of? Any thoughts, Mike, about?
No. I mean, I would invite the person, they can add some clarifying comments into the Q&A if so, and we can come back to it.
Yeah, I would just in general, I would say that the value of itineracy is to provide a fresh perspective, but also the value of itineracy is to match gifts and graces with the needs of the community, as seen from kind of a bird's eye view on the part of the district superintendent. I would say also, back in the day when women were first ordained, it would have been hard in a call system to hire a woman or a person of color. That cross-cultural appointments are part of the power and flavor of the United Methodist Church because we make them. And in a call system, usually congregations call people they are comfortable with in that role. And so I would say just overall, there's been a value in itineracy with breaking open the possibilities of who we see in the pulpit. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that, but I don't know what they're talking about specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add that I think the other piece that kind of goes hand in hand with the commitment to itineracy is around considerations for spouses, partners, family members, right?
Absolutely.
And that Bishop Oelwein is definitely comes from it, in my experience of her, as valuing itineracy and the commitment that the clergy make to itineracy, but also taking very seriously those other pieces about the needs of the family, the needs and what those are, and that that's a huge factor for us as well as we try to balance those things.
I just might add that I know that churches under a call system spend quite a bit of money when they're doing a search for a pastor. So, I mean, it can be $100,000 for a church to go do a national search for a pastor. So this saves you money too.
And I do understand that there's a balance between the opportunities that present themselves in itineracy versus the values of longevity of appointment. Because in a call system, you get, once they spend that $100,000, they might have a clergy person for 25 or 30 years, right? And you're unlikely to have that. in the United Methodist Church. But I also think another aspect of the itineracy is that there is a presumption from the earliest days of Methodism that the laity are going to be extremely active as leaders of the church, and that it's the laity that is the glue that keeps the church together, not so much whoever sent you as the pastor.
Okay. Is there a way for a resource for churches that have done the single board model to kind of share what their structures look like, so that that's available to other churches as a template, so churches don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel in terms of what a single board structure can look like? Is there a way we can facilitate, some resources around that regarding churches that have already done it and how they've done it?
Yeah, lots of churches are already doing this. So when you ask your district superintendent, and he or she will connect you with those churches, and each church has a slightly different model of this.
I think the chart that DS Sunny showed that says one board, single board nominations, single board SPRC nominations, single board, that is a model. I think also, it's an opportunity for your church leadership to really look at what model will work best for us. And then come, instead of taking a cookie cutter from somebody else, figure out what will work best for you, and then go to your DS, who can then connect you up, as Samuel said, with other churches that are doing it.
Another possible resource too sometimes are the circuits. And so your pastor, your certified lay minister, being in conversation with the other folks in the circuit who have maybe already made that transition to a single board model, and can also share some resources that way as well. So.
And Google is your friend. Look up single board model. You'll get lots of resources from various conferences.
Kind of along
Mike,
a similar, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, Mike, I just wanted to add that for us as clergy, or maybe as committee members, we might see the prospect of moving to a single board model as something that's exciting and rejuvenating, and something that can benefit our contexts and congregations. But we also know the way that change functions in church is that there's going to be people who are skeptical, people who are saying, hey, my grandmother was an SPR chair back in 1960. How dare you get rid of? And so there's going to be, even after a discernment process, along with coming together, what's best practices. I think the leadership, whether you're talking about a pastor or committee members, is to help the church through a season of change, that even if the change is good, it's going to be something that's going to, require a lot of grace, because it's going to be something that's constantly moving. It's not a perfect, again, cookie cutter model. But two, understanding that there might even be periods of grief and loss, because something that is familiar with them is being replaced by some newfangled single board. What do you call this thing? How come we're not all meeting? And so that's just the work of the church in general, but especially when you're talking about leadership model changes.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next question. Are there templates available for finance committees, finance chairpersons, related to creating a budget for the local church?
Well, I'm wondering if we're looking for a template for a process, or whether a template for just the budget itself. Really, I could bring to the website some thoughts about budgeting process, but I don't know of any real template. And there's books written about it, but I think it'd be helpful if whoever asks the question just shoots me an email, and we can talk on the phone or through email about what they're looking for.
also, Mike, circuits, right? Ask your circuit, like among churches, you can share your budgets. I know sometimes churches get a little nervous about wanting to share their money things with other churches, but I think just a simple budget that blanks out the numbers, if that's a problem, you could talk among yourselves as circuits too.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes churches are looking for an idea as to whether their budget looks reasonable in terms of the proportion of staff versus admin versus program, those kinds of things. So, that's something we could have a conversation about.
Yeah, it's good.
So the next question is it okay for someone as an SPRC chair to speak directly with their DS regarding pastoral concerns? The answer is yes, absolutely. That's actually a primary function of the SPRC chair role. So do not hesitate to reach out to your superintendent if there are pastoral concerns that you need to communicate with them about.
And I'll say the first question I will then ask is, have you talked directly to your pastor about this? And there may be reasons that you haven't. So that's not a disqualifying question. But of course, that's what we're here for.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for that nuance, Mary. That's important. And then similarly, can the lay leader go to the SPRC meetings? The lay leader is actually a member of the SPRC per the Book of Discipline. So the lay leader not only can, but is automatically a member of the Staff Parish Relations Committee. And yes, that continues to apply even in a unified church board model. Okay. Another question about single board model. When a church is considering transitioning to that, this is kind of, I think, kind of chronology. Should they discuss and decide it at the church council and then have a conversation with the DS? Or should there, I guess, what's the sequence in terms of it? What point should the DS be brought into the conversation about transitioning to a single board model? Should they be brought in at the beginning or after the church has essentially had those conversations and decided that they want to go that direction?
Well, I personally think after they've already talked about it and decided they want to go that direction, because if somebody comes to me and says, we're thinking about doing a single board model, I'll say, go explore it. Go, what would that look like for you? And then come back to talk about setting the details, because I may have some ideas because I've seen a lot of them. And then also to set up that charge conference to adopt that. I would say it's really important vis-a-vis what DS Macias said, that you don't just talk about it within your church council, but that you also take some time to share with and communicate with the congregation and hear what they're worried about as well. Because I already know what I've experienced as some of those worries is if the ministries don't have a chance to share at a single table of church council, then how will the ministries communicate with one another and the rest of church leaders? So communication is a factor you have to take into consideration. And the other thing is, will my voice as a fill in the gap, treasurer, SPRC member, trustee, will my voice be watered down? Because will my autonomy and my voice be watered down because of this? And I think that both of those are important questions to be addressed and can't just be addressed within the church council as a matter of efficiency. I think it has to do with how you're going about living your lives together as a church. So really entertaining the one board model, single board model, is a way to clarify some of who you are as a ministry and kind of what your culture is as a church. It's a real opportunity whether you decide to go that direction or not.
The bottom line is that any structural change should be approved by your charge conference. And in terms of specific order of sequence up to that charge conference is up to you and up to the pastor. So the pastor or lay leader can initiate the initial conversation.
Good.
Right. So next question is, how are resources like coaching and other forms of guidance and support made available to pastors and engaged by pastors?
Anybody could speak to that, right? We have a ministerial education fund that is budgeted to the Board of Ordained Ministry, where there is 50% funding for coaching that your clergy person can have access to. If you're talking about coaching for the church or for the church leadership, that there is no special fund to cover that. There's no grant money per se to cover that. Correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I believe that that would be the responsibility of the church itself. Having said that, everyone in this room knows some really good coaches. So if you decide to go that direction, we can point you in the right direction depending on what the issue is. So if you're having some struggles because of misunderstanding between or among cultures in your church, that's a certain kind of intercultural competency coaching that I highly recommend. If you're having problems with just kind of a dysfunction of communication among your leadership, that's a certain kind of coaching. What else, Mike? Like if it's coaching toward becoming more open-minded and visionary about how you engage your community, that's a
We lost your volume, Mary, or at least I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the other things I would add is that there's professional coaching, which really kind of covers the spectrum of what Mary was just talking about. So there's as many different kinds of coaches as there are subject areas, essentially, that you might be interested in. And then the other resource I think that's very common is spiritual direction, which is different than coaching, but it's more about the pastor's individual spirituality and sense of call and just kind of more internal and introspective. Someone working with them, being reflective about where are they experiencing God in the midst of their life or their ministry, or maybe even in a particular specific situation that they're dealing with in kind of the season of ministry in their local church. So those are kind of the two primary, the professional coaching and the spiritual direction. We encourage pastors to proactively engage those as they feel the need to engage those. And as D.S. Mary said, there is funding, some funding available for some of those kinds of things. And then there are occasions where we as a cabinet or as a district superintendent actually will come alongside a pastor and encourage them, or even say, we want you to kind of go through a coaching process with someone because we have noticed things, or maybe a pattern of things where we feel like there's just some strengthening that could happen that could really be beneficial to them for their long-term, success in ministry, but also for the churches that they serve. So, the encouragement is for pastors to be proactive about engaging that kind of support and services, but there are occasions where we as superintendents come alongside of them and say, hey, we really want you to do some work with the coach around this particular issue, and then work to facilitate that with them, and quite often as a cabinet end up paying a portion or all of the financial obligation around that if we're actually requiring them to do it. So,
and the last thing I'll say is that there's also the potential for some informal coaching. If you've got a specific issue that needs to be addressed, we have many talented pastors, and including many talented retired pastors who have a speciality in one area or another. And sometimes all a church needs is for somebody from outside to come in and hear what the situation is, and then be a active, reflective, discerning listener to then just give some insight and some support. So there's all sorts of avenues. Basically, call your DS.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly add as well is that, part of the genius, or at least the opportunity of being in a connectional system where we're not just these single congregations kind of working it out by ourselves, is the fact that we can harness the resources of a larger group of churches and a larger body, be it the district or the conference, to get those needs addressed. That is very important because I know the inertia of ministry is to like become insular and just kind of do and kind of hunker down and just kind of bear down, put your head down and make it happen. And sometimes the best result does not bear that. That leads to burnout, that leads to a whole lot of things. So it's important to be able to have the valves of structures like SPRC wide open so that these conversations are happening. And again, SPRC, that is happening from SPRC to the pastor, but that should also be happening from the pastor to SPRC, right? To be able to say, hey, these are the things I'm struggling with, or I need some time off, or vice versa. And so that the right type of pressure or demand or encouragement can come to the district and the conference to make sure, whether it's circuit or through the DS or through the bishop, that we are able to activate as a connectional ministry that can help alleviate any concerns, be they personal or congregational, to the local body. That's the only way that it works, because oftentimes, as I said before, the demand doesn't come until we're at a crisis point. And so I'm hoping that we can, use the genius of our system proactively, as we said.
So Diane, I'm going to throw these next two to you. One is about rental agreements with nonprofit groups, and how do they need to show nonprofit status and insurance, such as things like Girl Scouts, NA, AA groups. And then the second question is, how long do financial records need to be maintained?
Well, in a typical lease kind of situation, where you will have a formal lease with a tenant, you would ask them for the same letter, that kind of letter that I showed you how to get to show to other people to prove that you're not for profit. If that nonprofit is not part of a group ruling, then they would have their own individual letter from the IRS that they should be showing us to demonstrate that they are a nonprofit also. And that's a document that you need to have to show, to give to the county when you're renewing your welfare exemption every year. They want to know not only the names of your tenants, but they want the tenant's document that demonstrates that the tenant is a nonprofit. But in the cases you mentioned, Mike, about Girl Scouts or NA or AA, my experience over the years has been it is helpful for insurance purposes and for other purposes, sometimes for your ad board or your church in general, to adopt a position that these are programs of your church, and to make sure that if anything happens from a liability standpoint, that you're covered. Now, Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts would have their own insurance, and they should be able to provide you with a certificate of insurance that names the church as additionally insured. But in the case of AA and NA groups, I'm not sure that they are part of a larger organization that can do that. So in those cases, you are somewhat assuming the liability, and that's okay as long as you understand that those meetings and those groups to be part of the program of your church, at least informally.
Mhm.
And then on the archives question, I'll put up on my webpage again a document from the General Commission on Archives from our denomination that gives you a lot of detail. But what I glean from that is in most cases, most documents need to be maintained for 7 years. The ones that need to be kept permanently would be the minutes of your Board of Trustees meetings, obviously your deeds, any legal documents like deeds or legal settlements. Permanently, you would also keep your year-end financial report. Those are and charge conference minutes, which is also something your DS should be keeping permanently as well. But again, take a look at this document from the General Commission on Archives. It goes through a lot of detail.
Okay.
Do my DS friends have any better advice in terms of AA and NA groups? I think that was the advice I used to get from Don Jones when he was our insurance agent, that we just want to make sure that anybody that comes to those groups would be covered if they had a slip or a fall or any other kind of liability issue.
All right.
I like to have during charge conferences, if there's a listing of ministries of the church and you have NA or AA or any 12-step group that's meeting in your building, that you simply list, these are ministries of our church. In other words, we're making our place available for these ministries. And then that's what, who is the gal that used to come and give the talks from Heffernan? Dawn L. Jones.
Yeah.
She said that it really doesn't usually come up, but that's a way to cover yourself.
Good. Yeah.
All right. So next question, what committees is the pastor allowed to attend? And then is the pastor allowed to make finance decisions, SPRC decisions, and nomination decisions?
Well, the pastor is an ex officio member on every committee, so they are allowed to attend everything, and they are the chair of nominations.
And even in the SPRC meetings, where there will be a discussion for pastors, yes, the pastors can attend those meetings. But usually pastors excuse themselves. But somehow, if the pastors insist that they should be there, yes, they should be there.
Mm-hmm.
Diane, do you want to say anything about the piece of it about pastor making financial decisions?
Yeah, in our denomination, we really don't want the pastor making financial decisions. We've put up a lot of guardrails around any kind of potential abuse of power around money, so that you have a finance committee that's in charge of financial decisions. Pastor's obviously a person that will come and attend those meetings, but I don't think they have a vote at those meetings. So a pastor can be there and can express themselves in terms of preferences and their vision of what they think the church needs to be doing, but they're not making financial decisions.
And one thing I want to just caution clergy about and finance committees about is a practice of the pastor spending money on things that have not been budgeted for or approved of through the finance system, and then showing up with receipts and saying, reimburse me for this. If that's happening, then it's very important that the Staff Parish Relations Committee get engaged in that, in setting up a policy for how money is approved and then dispersed.
Yeah, I mean, that's true for anybody in the church. I mean, sometimes it's
Oh, thank you.
just
Yeah.
a layperson that's going out and buying stuff and wanting reimbursement.
Reimburse me. Yeah, no.
Yeah, so that's the reason, one of the good reasons to have a budget. So then that if something's budgeted, you don't have to go get it approved necessarily individually. But if it's something unusual or something that's not expressly budgeted for, then you need to have the guardrails up there. I think one of the areas that we try to uh, help pastors with specifically is for professional expenses, so they understand what they hopefully all have a budget for their professional expenses, but sometimes they need some help understanding what falls under that category.
And do we have that on the website? We do somewhere in finance and administration, don't we?
We have some old resources from back when, we shifted from from pastors being independent contractors now to being employees, but that's been 30 years. But I can see if we have anything that's a little more recent.
Up to date, yeah. Because I think that sometimes it's confusing for churches. I don't know that this question was addressing this, but professional expenses are part of the pastor's compensation. So that $3,000, $4,000 that is part of their compensation is for them to use for mileage that relates to the work, not the commute, but relates to the work of visiting people in hospitals and in homes, etc. For meals where they might take committee chairs or something out to coffee, it would cover that. But also, more to the point, their expenses of going to the gathering of spiritual leaders, which is required every February for your clergy person to attend, expenses related to annual conference, unless that is a different budget item. Some churches run that as a separate budget item. And also vestments and books and continuing education, all of that falls under that. And they do not, your clergy leaders do not have to get prior approval of those expenditures up to the amount that has been agreed upon in their compensation package. That's straight reimbursement. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah.
So there's a question about how many churches in the conference have gone to the single board model. I don't think we have a hard number on that, but I think we can say with confidence that the number of churches making that transition continues to increase, that it's something that more and more of our churches are moving toward, for sure. This is a follow-up question about whether or not the SPRC chair, whether it's appropriate for them to go to the superintendent with concerns about the pastor. So the follow-up is, but should the SPRC chair go directly to the superintendent without consulting the SPRC committee as a whole first?
Well, it would be hard for them to consult the SPRC committee as a whole because you have to meet with the pastor there. Correct? Okay, so don't forget that. You cannot have, if you're having a struggle with pastor, you can't meet secretly or separately. So I would say go to your district superintendent. And as I said, the first question will be, have you discussed this with your pastor? Because you may have discussed this with your pastor in the context of the whole SPRC.
Yeah, usually, whenever there's an issue regarding your pastor, that will be discussed at your regular SPRC meeting. But the situation is so drastic or very difficult to discuss, then yes, you can directly contact your DS. And then DS will give you some guidance how to resolve those issues.
And I would say, I don't know if the rest of you DSs agree with this or not. I would say, if it's something small, stretch yourself to see if you can have a difficult, touchy conversation with your clergy person bracketed by prayer and bracketed by we're all in this together and we want to see this resolved so that we're better off after the resolution than we were before. If it's a medium-sized problem, don't wait until it becomes a real crisis to reach out to your DS. Do it sooner than later. I would rather hear that there's a problem and have a chance to weigh in or be helpful early than have it be a huge mess that we look back at and say, well, that would have been easy to solve back then. I don't know what the rest of you DSs think.
Agreed. So, Diane, this is just point of information for you. Someone saying that they're not able to find the record retention policy that you mentioned on the website. So that's not anything you necessarily need to answer, but that there's some challenge in finding that.
I'll put it front and center, on the web page that's for departments, finance and administration for churches.
Okay,
When this meeting is done, I'll do that.
great. Thank you. Sorry, there was one I wanted to get to that I lost. So when a lay leader is married to the SPRC chair, how does that work in terms of the lay leader's involvement on the SPRC committee?
Yeah, technically, family members cannot be in the SPRC at the same time.
Right.
Since SPRC chair cannot excuse himself or herself, then the lay leader should excuse himself or herself in every SPRC meeting.
And that may be an opportunity to have more than one lay leader. You don't have to have just one lay leader. You can have co-lay leaders so that that other one who's not married could come and serve on SPRC.
Okay. CLM reimbursements. The question is, are they the same as an employee reimbursement, even though they're not an employee? I think what they're meaning is the CLM is an employee, but they're a lay employee, not a clergy employee. So that's the distinction. But Diane, is there anything you want to say just about, is there a difference between a certified lay minister receiving reimbursements as a lay employee versus what that looks like for a clergy employee?
No, I think it's the same. As far as the IRS is concerned, it's the same. And I think internally for the church, they need to be budgeting it just as if it was an ordained person.
Well, when DSs assign a certified lay minister to a church, we create a memorandum of understanding that includes an understanding about any compensation, including professional expenses. So I think it would be the same.
Okay. And this is a question for clarification. Was it said that the pastor cannot vote in a finance committee meeting, that they're allowed to be there, but they do not have a vote? What's the distinction in terms of that?
I think that's true. I could be wrong, but my understanding is clergy, other than chairing the nominating committee, clergy are typically not voting on any church committee, are they?
I don't think.
That
Oh,
was
go
always
ahead.
my practice in local church ministry, was I was in all the meetings, but I never officially voted on anything.
Voice, but no vote.
Right.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, we have 1 minute left. So Mike, choose one that will be final.
There's one question about the difference between a lease and an easement. Diane, this was specifically directed to you.
An easement is something that's recorded on your deed that gives another party a right to access a part of your property. They aren't paying any rent for it, though. They may have paid at the time the easement was created. They may have given you a fee, but they don't have a lease and they aren't paying rent monthly or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Too
Yeah,
good.
there are some remaining questions. So we will end officially this meeting, but we can continue. Those of us who can remain a little bit more and continue to answer those questions. Okay?
Dia, Sam, can I
Yeah.
just mention this one thing I want to, because I don't know who's going to remain, but I just wanted to give just an overall encouragement. You know, one of the things I love about the Wesleyan tradition, at least in its theology, is this idea about grace, right? And how we talk about prevenient and justifying, but that sanctifying grace is important, at least even conceptually. It means we're not perfect, but there's this grace that is allotted to us as we move towards perfection, meaning we're not going to get it right, but we can continuously get it better. And I know for me, as someone who is even coming new into this DS role, there's a whole lot of things. I saw questions before about how do you manage, how do you balance all these things? How much do we tell the congregation? Well, the truth of the matter is there's probably not a handbook that's going to give you all the right points. The bigger point is that we're just going to engage it and trust that God is going to hold us up in this process, that we will continuously grow, hopefully get better, adjust, and know that God is going to just kind of be with us through the process of getting better. And, you know, that is just a word of encouragement. That's true for us within our personal spiritual lives, but it's also true for us formationally in our social lives, be it within a church or administratively. It's all part of one thing that is happening. So,
Okay, thank you. That is a quite graceful concluding remark. Thank you very much. So I give thanks to the presenters and the panelists who share their knowledge, wisdom, and experience. And I also thank all of you who participated in this training. So this training videos and web links to materials used in this training will be sent to your email addresses early next week. And thank you for joining us today. May you all have a wonderful Saturday afternoon. Thank you very much.